Bona tarda, benvinguts. Un dia com avui, el 20 de gener de
Good morning. Welcome. The 20th of January 1945, the Nazi authorities blew up the gas chambers of the extermination camps of Auschwitz camps, the archives, all the places where the people had been murdered, and about 58,000 prisoners were evacuated before the Red Army came in. Who would have guessed that 81 years later we would be talking here about Holocaust in the University of Barcelona in terms of democratic challenges of today? And this is where our event today makes sense beyond the horror of Auschwitz. Auschwitz and the construction of the European memory is the title of this event, and with the support of the City Council of Barcelona and the co-financement of the program Citizens, Equality, Rights and Values of the European Commission. We are thankful for the presence of Dr. Danuta Glondys, General Council of Poland in Barcelona, also the director of the UB Group, Núria Fonsoler, and the director of the Solidaritat UB Foundation, Xavier López. I'll now give the floor to José Olgo Perro, Vice Rector of Culture, Memory and Heritage of the University of Barcelona. Very well. Once again, the European Memory Association has organized an event at the University of Barcelona, and once again we are sharing this space for the International Day of Memory of the Victims of Holocaust. Obviously, this is an event that is a memory, a homage, a look to the past, but it is also very present. It has a perspective of present and future, because it is important to give our future generations some legacies and knowledge linked to anti-fascism and democracy. Obviously, this is a role played by the Rectorate of the University of Barcelona, and the new Vice Rectorate have been renamed as Vice Rector of Culture and Heritage, because we wanted this to be a key element. In fact, the building where we are, the space that we are occupying today, which is a magnificent library, used to be the chemistry laboratory, even though you might be surprised by it. The building has been changing. On the 17th March 1938, the building was brutally bombed by the Italian fascist aviation during the Civil War. The Italian aviation squadrons were in Mallorca, and Franco ordered them to attack the Mediterranean part of the peninsula, particularly Barcelona as an industrial and working focal center and as a seat of three governments: the Catalan government seat, the Spanish Republic seat, and the Basque Country government in exile. So it was a particularly punished place, and this building was bombarded in 3 occasions, seriously bombarded, and the professors at the university signed a manifesto addressed to the whole university, the international university community, to ask for support. The air war was total novelty. It involved a change of scale in war, especially when it came to psychological warfare, bombarding places that were hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, and that was totally new. Unfortunately, this is still a reality today. This is why our university needs to feel particularly linked to all the events that are organized in the defense of democracy and democratic memory. We should think that in 1939, when the war was over, with the outcome of the war, half of the professors in the university had to be exiled. Pere Bosing Pere, the rector who had to go to exile and died in exile. So we will always keep this solidarity with this memory, and especially with the Holocaust memory, which is an extreme intimidation, violence, ignominious spheres of history, which will be a priority for us always. So I am deeply thankful for this presence of our illustrious special guests, especially Mr. Piotr Cywiński. Is this how you pronounce your name? Sorry, it's a bit complicated. Who has the task of directing one of the most important spaces to acknowledge the terrible Nazi horror. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Alcoberro. Now I will give the floor to Dr. Jordi Guixé, Director of the European Observatory of Memories, EUROM. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you for being here. Thanks for giving me the floor to the Vice Rector. Director Xavier, all of you friends, all of you PhDs, from the perspective of memory and other perspectives, when as Michael Rothbard said, there's a multiplying effect of the unique experience of that Holocaust. The Holocaust is being analyzed from the European Observatory of Memorials as one non-forgetting collective memory event to criticize all genocides, not only the genocide against the Jewish people, but genocide against different ethnic minorities, minorities for reasons of race, religion, politics. About 46 are taking place right now. And so all of these events are being organized by people who have been working in the institutions, in public positions, to come to explain parts of the history, but also parts of the memory, and coming to explain the complexity of the creation of these memorial spaces. Of course, one of the most important of them in the world, which was a leading space, and it was appointed as World Heritage, is this Auschwitz Memorial space. We should also talk about the present in the European Union and the international relations, because we are living times of complexity. We are discussing the current conflicts as well. There is a great perplexity of our present. There are other violences, other genocides that are happening right now. Our European Union, our European Commission, with its citizens on equality, rights, and values, is working on reinforcing these democratic values, and this is to talk about genocides, Holocaust, but also other genocides that are happening right now. So the University of Barcelona is always welcoming us. We are part of the university, and we have taken steps forward also with the creation of this faculty, with this creation of this department. So joining the complexities of past and present allows us to have people like Piotr to come explain important things to me. We have important challenges today. We have had failures again And again, anthropologists, artists, lawyers, architects, all of you are working hard to create societies that might be free, more free. Piotr was saying that not enough students were working on the project of Catalan deportees to the Nazi camps, also some from my own village. And thanks to you, we were able
van tenir una bona acollida, moltes gràcies, però també una visita també d'alguna manera que els va interpel·lar, sorprenent i de molt aprenentatge, sobretot per alguns dels pares que no tenien la sort de tenir tants estudis. Una d'aquesta noia, a més, puc fer publicitat.
Some of these students have even won prizes. A girl who carried out some research work on one of the people deported, and she was from a school in the town of Solsona. We are involved in all of this and also in involving the new generations. And one last thing I would like to say, one of our challenges is also to present this to you. Our Auschwitz-Birkenau has a very good organized system of the Auschwitz Memorial. The Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial and Museum has a very good organization to organize visits by students, by student groups, and the training and the formation, the training of students is among the most important challenges that we have for today. Students might access this kind of information and knowledge. So we are thankful to all of these people, and to all of you, the guests who have been here. And now I really have to hand you the floor. Thanks for coming on a complicated day. I know we've had, some an accident in Cordoba, a train accident, and we know with the problems with the trains, the regional trains coming here, and some people have not been able to attend because they had some problems with the transport. Thank you, Teresa, also for Madrid. Well, okay, thank you very much. So now we will ask Dr. Cywiński to start with his speech. The speech will be in English. If somebody would prefer to follow this in Catalan, you have simultaneous interpretation devices, simultaneous translation devices. After Dr. Cywiński's presentation, we will have a brief discussion, and there will also be time to make questions or comments. Dr. Cywiński is an activist, social activist, and a historian, and a researcher. I cannot read his whole resume because it would be never ending. I would rather have him speak and listen to him, but he's the director of Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial Museum, so he will be able to give us a good perspective, both from the perspective of how the Auschwitz history is explained, and both from that perspective and the perspective of how the visitors' perspective changes, or the visitors' view changes. Dr. Cywiński, you have the floor.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the invitation. It's a difficult period for me because of the anniversary of the liberation next week, but I really wanted to be here, and I will present some few. Consider that as the beginning of our event, on the beginning of the memorial, how it was created, what was the most important issue in the first times. After we have a discussion, and I hope that we'll save enough time to have some exchange, because it's certainly the most important part of such a meetings. Okay. Yeah. I will not give any remarks about the history of Auschwitz here. You can see the most important parts of the camps. You have the city of Oświęcim. You have Auschwitz I here. The enormous Birkenau, the Bunawerke factory, chemical factory, and some sub-camps around. It's not the entire complex. The complex was certainly bigger, but those are the most important things that remains when the German was running, when the Russian were approaching. They evacuated the last 60,000 prisoners in January 45, and as it was already said, they burned the majority of the archives or what was possible to prove, let's say, the enormity of the crimes. Okay, Russians arrive from the east. They were not really going to, I don't know, liberate Auschwitz. All the camps in Europe were liberated in a hazardous way. Let's say it was on the way of the front. They were running in order to take Breslau, Wrocław, before the Germany will be able to defend it as a last defending point before Berlin. And by that way, they arrived from Krakow to the city of Oświęcim, and they found the camp of Auschwitz. First of all, they use very quickly what they saw as a propaganda tools or elements. Here you have a drawing that was created just on the arrival of the Soviets to Auschwitz, because of course the army was accompanied by some journalists, let's say, or some propagandists like this. But very, very quickly they found also something like 7,000 last prisoners in Auschwitz that was unable to be evacuated with the other to some other camps interior to Germany. Among those 7,000 prisoners that stay in the camp were something like 700 or 800 kids, small kids in general. If I can approach, okay, I will. So the first days were to check if there is still somebody else who is living in the camp, because those people were many times searching for the secret place in order to not be discovered in the last moments by the SS. And yes, they evacuated those people from Birkenau, from some sub-camps, to Auschwitz I, that was the most let's say, formal camp with some solid buildings. And the first people who helped those 7,000 persons were some Russians or Soviet doctors, and some very quickly some medical personnel was coming from Krakow also to help those who survived. You must imagine in the situation where that they were in, they were not judged enough strong to be evacuated, and during the last 10 days after the evacuation they didn't receive anything to eat because the camp was nearly empty. The situation was very, very, very difficult. Many of them died very, very quickly after this liberation. However, yes, it was the first moment then for those soldiers. They saw those victims. As I told you, some small kids among them. A sort of, yes, hospital was prepared very quickly in Auschwitz I, in the building of the camps, because Krakow was 70 kilometers far from here, and 70 kilometers in, no, it changed a law, no? 70 kilometers in winter with the infrastructure completely demolished by the war. It was absolutely impossible to evacuate 7,000 people to Krakow. Even Krakow, who saw the front a few weeks before, has not enough places in hospitals in Krakow itself. And of course, those persons were unable to join their original cities, I don't know, towns or regions. So they has to be first of all helped on the site of Auschwitz itself. Here you can see this hospital. It's the only photo that I think we have from this building. It's one of the block in the camp. An enormous question was about the kids. What's to do with the kids? We are speaking about children that was 2, 3, 4 years old. So some of them didn't know their family name, didn't really know from where they were coming. It was a special issue, is how to try to save them, but also how to try to refine after. It takes sometimes long years to refine their exact name or their identity. Some of them were coming from, for example, regions that after the war was in Belarus or in Ukraine. So it was not easy also to manage those research. And I knew, he's not alive now, but I knew very well one man who never learned. He has the impression that he's somewhere close to Grodno in Belarus, but it was just an impression. He even didn't remember his family name until his last days. The second issue was the number of dead people, those who were not evacuated but did not survive to the arrival of the Red Army. There were at least 700,000 or 800,000 corpses that were 700 or 800 corpses that were found by the liberators in Auschwitz I and in Birkenau mainly. So there were some mass ceremonies with hundreds of funerals conducts like this. You see some mass graves prepared. And the next issue was how to find some information, because when the world has understood what was in Auschwitz, many people were sending some letters, some telegrams, some... I'm sorry, but I have the impression that it changed alone, this. Okay. Yes, to find some information. And there was nothing. There were 90 to 92% of the archives were burned by the SS. But very, very quickly, already in the summer of 45, some first actions to try to put together what remains in the archives and to try to answer to those people who are searching for their approaches were undertaken. At that time, there were no, let's say, no memorial, no museum, no any official institution, but some first people tried to organize these actions. And I must surprise you, perhaps, as the first who tried to organize such a, let's say, para-institutional activities were some survivors, some prisoners of Auschwitz, liberated many times in some other camps after the evacuation, in Mauthausen, Ebensee, Dachau, Werenbelsen, Buchenwald. And instead of going back to see their home, their city, their families, they decided to go back to Auschwitz to try to preserve and to save everything that will be possible to be saved. This is the biggest difference today, because they were items and documents that were saved already in 1945. The first institution were created in 1947. So it created a completely different situation that you can have in, I don't know, in many other former camps in Europe, when some institutions or some memorials were created in general in the second half of the 60s, 20 years after the liberation, when many documents were disappearing, many objects were disappearing, even many buildings disappeared. So the situation was completely different in Auschwitz because of the actions of the survivors who tried to save all what was possible to be saved from the beginning. One just remark, why in many places the former camps were transformed into memorials in the late 60s. It's something that has to do with the remembrance, with the memory. In the memory, in the genetical code of the memory, there is a fear of what the next generation would remember. And in the late 60s, the generation that was born after the war is becoming adult. So what they will know if we don't tell them what was, 20 years ago. And in the majority of the biggest camps in Europe, it's at that time, and under this kind of pressure, that some memorials were established. Here you see some first lists of victims, really in actions before even the creation of the museum. And the second action that was, third or fourth action that was very important, there were some analysis of what was really going on during those 5 years in the site. There was some, first of all, some research about all the items that remains after the camp, and some groups of lawyers or of people from different sciences touching to some crimes or to some legal issues or some, I don't know, research on those kind of topic were working on this place. Among them, the most, let's say, important commission from Moscow, directed by Moscow, who decided very, very quickly that there were 4 or 5 million of dead of Auschwitz, the number that remains the official communist number until 88 or 89, in fact. But they found, of course, a ton of human hairs. They found all the belonging to the victims. In majority, those belongings were coming from the Hungarian Jews. That was the latest one to be transported to Auschwitz with the belongings. Yes, you can see this Russian commission. And of course, those survivors wanted to take care of the camp, of the space of the camp itself. Here you see pictures. It's the main entrance to Auschwitz I, and you don't see the inscriptions Arbeit macht frei. Because those propagandists who arrived with the Russian army take many things that they were thinking it will be useful for some political or propaganda issue with them to be transported to Moscow and to St. Petersburg. Today they are at least in Moscow and St. Petersburg in different museums. And they packed also on a train the Arbeit macht frei inscriptions. But some underground movement still existed in the region, both it from some guards who were supposed to protect it for a few liters of vodka, to be concrete, and preserve it during the first 2 years in a secret place in Oświęcim, in the town. So in the first pictures, I will show you some more. You see the main entrance that you know very well from different other movies or pictures without this inscription. it came back, yes, when the museum was created in 47. That means that, in a way, those Soviet propagandists were quite smart and intelligent in order to see very, very quickly that it can be a symbolic inscription. It can play a role. It's interesting to take it to Moscow. Yeah. If Auschwitz I didn't change a lot in those first years, it was a little bit different in Birkenau. First of all, a prison for some collaborators from some Gestapo, some Volksdeutsch, some SS were organized by the Soviets in a part of Birkenau. That's why until today you have this first rank of wooden barracks that remains, only because it was a Soviet prison during a few months after the liberation. You can see here the interior of one of these barracks with some inscription here. During the war, there were some propaganda inscriptions in Germany, and now you have some inscriptions in Russian. Yeah. But very quickly, I think in the second half of 45, the majority of those prisoners were evacuated into the Soviet Union. But those barracks, however, remains. There were, during this period between the liberation and the creation of the memorial, there were a lot of people, local, not local. Here you have even some Russian soldiers who were searching for gold in the ground. And the camp in general was used as a source of, here you have another pictures of this period, was used as a source of material in a Poland completely demolished by the war. And you can, if you have the impression that you know what was the war because you saw what was going on in France or in Belgium or somewhere else, it's a completely false impression that you have. To give you, it was a different war in the Eastern Europe. Just to give you the proportion, the number of only civilian victims of Warsaw, and only the city of Warsaw, were biggest than the number of civilian victims from the entire France and Great Britain put together. It was really a completely different world. Everything was destroyed. So the material from many barracks, especially the wooden barracks, that were some barracks, prefabricated barracks before the war for horses. They were simply used as a material to rebuild something, yes, in the region. That's why you can see that if the brick barracks in Birkenau, in the part called women camps, subsist, the wooden barracks disappear very, very quickly. In order to be used for some first need in the reconstructions, only this first rank used by the Soviet remains. We don't know really where those barracks were used. Some traces were found in the region of Oświęcim, some traces even in Warsaw. It was, for example, used by the army for some I don't know, some hangars or something. But we do not have any information. And the wood also from the camp, as you can see here, were also used in this very cold winter. We do not have also all the information where this wood was transported. It was apparently organized by also the Soviets, probably for military reasons. We are still before the end of the war. But there's a lack of information about this. But at that time already there were some survivors working to the preservation to try to save all that is possible to save before even the memorial was created. Those are those people Fortunately for them, one of those survivors, a Polish political prisoner, becomes very quickly prime minister in Poland, Cywiński. That was an enormous help for those people who wanted to try to preserve this site. And already in 1947, the museum was created with the first exhibition that was they used some authentic objects, as you can see. So it was really a sort of very traditional museography. When you show things, you do not speak about, but you show things. A phenomenological one, yes, of course. But it was also accompanied by some ideological, of course, propaganda, because we are entering in a time when Poland was becoming communist, and it was a Stalinistic time, so it was certainly the most difficult. But the museum was open. It was an enormous group of visitors the first year, because many people wanted to see where their approach were killed. This is a difference between the Jewish history and the Polish history. And for the Jewish, you have 1 or 2 survivors per family who remember the 30 or 40 people killed. For the Polish history, you have the 30 or 40 people who were not killed, but who remember this 1 or 2 who were killed. A little bit those proportions made that this site becomes very, very quickly an important place in Poland, because a lot of families got some members who were imprisoned or killed in Auschwitz as political prisoners. Here you see some of those opening events. And the Polish Parliament passed an act calling into the creation of this museum, and this museum shall be preserved for all times as a monument. I think it's a longer vision of a legal system you can imagine. For all time, we have to preserve it. And it was the beginning of the memorial already in 1947. And as I told you, the majority of others were created in the second half, or in the second half of the 60s. That is quite interesting. The museum were open at the beginning. The majority of the visitors were those who had some family members who died, but very, very quickly some schools were coming, and the situations that at least we know more or less today was established with one enormous difference. At that time, the guide in the museum were survivors. That was, of course, from the emotional point of view, very important. But from the historical point of view, it was really not sufficient, because it was an oral history. You know, Auschwitz was an enormous camp. If you were here, that means you were not in some other places. If you were working in Auschwitz I, that means you never saw, for example, the arrival of the Jewish transport to Birkenau. And everyone has, let's say, more or less telling his own history. It took decades before the history will be prepared in a, let's say, elaborated by historians way, capturing all those oral history together, of course, but creating one history of the camp instead of many different individual histories and approaches. And a new exhibition were established. As I told you, with some ideological elements, but in general, showing authentic objects. It's something that is very interesting now, because in the majority of the historical museums, you have now a tendency since the mid-90s, perhaps, to build a historical narrative. Like if you open a book, you open an introduction, you have 4, 5, 6, 7 chapters, and a conclusion. And you go through this exhibition like you read a book. This is another perspective. This is a phenomenological approach. You don't tell, you show. And now I am in this difficult situation that I am changing now the main exhibition in Auschwitz. And we've got a lot of discussion because everybody told us when we were starting to work on this project, I don't know, 12 years ago perhaps, that yes, but now you have to prepare a good narrative exhibition like everywhere else, like in Yad Vashem, like in Washington, like in many other places. And after 3 years of discussions, we arrived to the conclusion, no, we will preserve this phenomenological aspect. Because people are not coming to only, at least to learn the history, they're coming to confront themselves with the authenticity. If people that were already in Yad Vashem or in United States Holocaust Memorial Museum or Memorial de la Shoah or whatever else, decide to come, however, to Auschwitz, that means they need something more. And we will, in this new exhibition that must be new only because of technical problems, we have to renew it completely. This phenomenological approach will be certainly preserved in a, of course, new and more secured way. Then you can see from the first pictures in the late 40s. Yeah, one of the very important slogan of the communist Stalinist especially time, that the concentration camps were a tool of the imperialism. In this ideology, let's say the Nazi era was the most brutal face of the imperialism. Yeah. But, for example, some talits were presented in this first exhibition at the beginning, and I know from some workers in the museum that are not alive anymore that there were, especially in '68, some remarks from the Communist Party from Krakow to take out those talits from the museum in order to give a more general, international, let's say, perspective. And the museum refused to take it out, of course, and they stand during the whole communist time, even in this most anti-Semitic period of the communism, they stay in the exhibition, showing very clearly who was the majority of the victims, even if the numbers were still falsified by Moscow. Yeah, and some first work of preservation were undertaken in the 50s. It was really some first works without any professional conservator at that time, but in order to save what would be possible to be saved. There were a lot of also political, let's say, events. The creation of the monument. This is the ancient one, on the place where the new one that you know perhaps today is built in the end of Birkenau, between the gas chamber number 2 and number 3. And there were also some first results of historical research that were published in the 50s. In general, it started. That helped to let's say recreate this history on the basis of the last documents that were preserved, that were not burned by the Nazis, and of all those testimonies that was recorded after the war by the museum. Yeah, here you see the new monument. I am not enthusiast of those kind of monuments. Still, after 20 years of work, I don't really know what he represents. I'm not really sure that on the authentic terrain like Birkenau is, you need a monument more to express something. I think the terrain is expressing certainly more than any artistic. But however, it's here since '67, so we live together. And there were also some very important mass events from time to time, like for the arrival of John Paul II in this place in 79. But there were also some diverse public political presence. Charles de Gaulle was in Auschwitz. I don't know, many others were coming to Fidel Castro, for example, were in Auschwitz, of course. And in 79, it was inscribed on the World Heritage list of UNESCO, with a mention that it represents all the site of the same type or of this kind from the world, and the others will not be inscribed. Even if I don't know what that means, of the same type or yes, such a place in the world, because I don't know if it stopped only to the German extermination and concentration camp, or if the camps of the Gulag are included, or if the camp of Phnom Penh are included in. I don't know really until now, but this was the mention adopted by UNESCO. And here you have just a few images at the end to say that what is the evolution. Here you have the number of visitors for the last 25 years, with the pandemic, of course, that you can remark between 19 and 22. Everybody was thinking around 2000, and I remember very well those discussions that, you know, the history has changed, the generations has changed, we are entering the new century, it's time to turn the page on this book, you know, there are some other problems in the world, there will be less and less visitors, it's normal, Europe is reunificated. I've got the impression that it's a little bit too early to say so, those type of prognostics. And you see, we were in 2000 we were around 500,000 visitors, and it was growing all the time except for the pandemic. Even if we recreated a free democratic Europe, even if the generation has changed, even if many other things appears. And some image from the museum of today, some very new storages for artifacts created with the help of the European Union, some new laboratories of preservation. Here you have some laboratories of microbiology, 400 square meters, in order to define the best method of preservation that will be applied to the objects after. Yeah, some new techniques in 3D. A new center of education. We are able to welcome 7 classes at the same time in 7 different classrooms now. Even a hostel that we finished to build 2 years ago, because we are determined to develop our voluntariat services. We have some 600 voluntary people from the entire world every year. The problem is not how to make them work, how to make them help us, how to let's say, feel them involved in this duty of memory. The problem was where they have to sleep, of course. They are, in general, students, they did not have money to pay 2 or 3 weeks of hotels. So we arrived at this conclusion that we will build a hotel for ourselves for nearly 100 places. Exhibitions that are traveling around the world. Here is an exhibition in Boston, I think. 1,500 square meters. So there are big exhibitions with hundreds of authentic objects. This exhibition was in Madrid, I think. It was 8 years ago, 7 years ago, something like this, I think. Yeah, and some new tools that we developed, I think, at the first museum in the world. Here you have a guide who is guiding online. You can order a visit online for your classroom, for example. You just have a TV in your class, he is guiding, he's walking, he's speaking, he's answering to the question of the classroom, he's in permanent contact with the classroom. We developed this, first of all, because of the pandemic, but the pandemic was too quickly finished. So after we proposed that to some schools in some parts of the world that is quite difficult to come in Auschwitz, there was not an enormous interest to that, I must tell you. Now we are developing that for all the schools who want, and we are developing that for the biggest international companies. Because we want to reach this level of visitors 40, 50 years old, working in some big companies, international companies, having some troubles with some human rights, some, how they treat them. There's more ethical questions that we can find in those companies that we can think. And we have already some that are really following this idea, and I organize every month, for example, for some groups of their board or board instance large, some visit like this, followed by some discussion about some important topics that it learned to them. We work with the media a lot. I think the media are the best collaborator of the memorials, really, because journalists still wanted to do something seriously. It's more and more difficult in the world that we are living, but they still wanted to have something to say, and this is wonderful. I have thousands of experience every year with some newspapers, media, journalists, and very few non-serious. Very 2, 3, 4 times perhaps. And we organize those kind of anniversaries of liberation. That was last year, the 80 anniversary. There were 3,000 people in this tent, among them 5 kings, 21 presidents. I even didn't count the prime minister. But there was more than 700 million of people who are looking on that online or through TV. I do not have the answer from all the countries, so I know about 700 million. I don't know how much it was more. And this is, I think, the goal of this alliance between media and memorials, because we are living in a world when memory counts more and more, and I think we can all be sure about this, that if we want to have some point of reference in order to analyzing what's going on so quickly, what's changing so quickly, we don't know what will be in 1 year, in 2 years, in 2 weeks perhaps. I think we have to count on the memory, understood that memory is something very similar to the experience. If you are experienced, you will be more able to judge the situation and to react. It is something very similar with the memory. For me, when I work in the memory, more and more I try to compare those two notions, and they are extremely similar for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Moltes gràcies. Tenim mitja horeta.
Thanks a lot. We have about half an hour where we'll have a brief discussion. We'll try it to be nice and flowing. I'll be speaking in English, and you'll have the floor in case you want to make any comments or questions. Also, to my left, Dr. Danuta Glondys is with me, who was Councillor of Culture for the City Council of Krakow, Director of Vallavecius, an entity that has been consolidated as a space for intercultural discussion and promotion of tolerance, and she's dedicated to university teaching in the spheres of cultural policies and intercultural policies. I would like to start by asking you,
from what I've been told, you have had a very special relationship with the Auschwitz Memorial site since childhood. So please, let's start there, if you like. What's your connection to the memorial site?
Don't run past the crematorium. You have to walk slowly. Don't walk. Don't look around. It's best to keep your head down, my mother said. Are you going to the river? Where are you going to swim? She asked. Next to Villa Hesse, I replied. Villa of Hesse, the commandant of the camp, was right next to the camp. The other side doesn't work. Okay, on the other side of the electric fence, famous fence, along with the gallows where Hess was hanged in 1947. This was a peculiar landmark of my childhood. Villa Hesse was one word for me. I didn't understand what it meant. When I was older, we were taken out of school to form a crowd to welcome some dignitaries at the crematorium. Reza Pahlavi, I welcomed, or to be extras in films, probably documentaries in Auschwitz. Then I would run away to my mother, to her office, which was located on grounds of the concentration camp. My mother was an accountant in the camp, in the museum. My next Auschwitz stage was a conscious one, learning history of the place and guiding visitors around the museum. It quickly became apparent that I cannot do it. I lacked resilience and distance. The Auschwitz experience shaped me in a way to respect other people, to respect life. Later, in my professional life, it served as a totally subconscious, unconscious compass pointing the way of development and my activities. So I did many things in my professional life. It is much less moving than the previous part. International cooperation projects, which I did both as the director of culture department and the director of the Villa Decius, introducing Krakow to ICON, which is International Cities of Refuge Network. Then culture, human rights. I am the author of the oldest Polish Human Rights Prize, which is Sergio Vieira de Mello Prize. And also I initiated and was successful to implement Paweł Adamowicz Award at the level of the European Union Committee of Regions. They give this award to those who protest against hate speech, lack of tolerance in the public, in this community life. Then my conferences about tolerance, about democracy, about totalitarian systems, refugees, the role of intelligentsia, many years of those, and promotion of human rights, whether they are coming from different culture from far away, or just local Roma communities or Lemko communities. This is what my professional life more or less was about. And I'm looking back now, I can see the traces taking me back to these pictures which Piotr showed, which I haven't seen for many, many years. I was just unable to see more. And why do I speak about it? Why do I want other people to learn about Auschwitz? It's not that part of my childhood was there, but because I think that we have the responsibility to speak for those who cannot speak, to teach our children and grandchildren that there were times where human life was worth nothing, and these were not good times, and we should learn to respect your colleagues and friends and neighbors and strangers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Glondys. As you said, Dr. Cywiński, memory is experience. What does the International Holocaust Remembrance Day mean today in a context marked by new conflicts, new genocide, political polarization, and a certain memory fatigue? What do we do in this context to keep memory as a priority?
I will perhaps surprise you, but I see many different difficulties or dangerous trend today in our world, but certainly not a memory fatigue. I saw a memory fatigue 3 years ago, yes, before Russia attacked Ukraine, and before Trump arrived to the White House. Now, with the situation completely out of control in Russia, in the United States, in China, that means the 3 biggest and richest and more powerful, military speaking, countries in the world, I have really not the impression that there is a problem to understand where the memory has to be replaced. 10 years ago, when I was saying in some conferences, the memory, the remembrance, it's a key to understand the today's time, not only a way to feel a sorrow about what happened decades before us, but a key to understand the today's times. Everybody was thinking, yes, Cywiński has to say that because it's his job, it's normal. Now everybody fully agree with me when I see something like this. I think that a very large public opinion understands certainly more now today that the remembrance and the memory is something that we need, that it's not something that we can, yes, eventually, you know, if you have some free time to develop through lectures or something like this. So more this world is completely imprevisible. More this world start to be dangerous. I think more people are looking for some points of reference, and thus it's difficult to imagine a point of reference more let's say heavy and more immovable than Auschwitz. And people are coming many times asking me to what I think, what they have to do, it's not my role. My role is to give them questions, not answers, for sure. It's everybody himself has to find or try to find some answers with his capacity, with his roles, with his experience, with his understanding, with his role that he played in the social way. I don't know, now or in 10 years, I don't know. But yes, I think that Auschwitz and the remembrance has to. It's not something comfortable, for sure, because those questions are not comfortable. Those are the most difficult questions that you would like to have very far from us. Huh? Why did I not do anything in this or some other occasion? Yeah. For example, just I really think that that this moral anxiety must coming from the memory as a normal fruit of the remembrance. And now I have the impression that more and more people understand this, that yes, memory do not give you answer, but they give you some very difficult and unpleasant, in fact, questions about you today. The memory do not serve to judge people from 1 century back. No, it's judge you. At least it's your tool. And one very important thing, just to close, let's say this part, we have this tendency to speak about the remembrance, about the memory in a very difficult, heavy, and a hard way. You have the lessons of memory. You have the obligation of memory, some work of memory, some transmission of memory from some parents, I don't know from who. And we want to explain that to teenagers that are 15, 16, 17 years old, that reject completely all the authority because they know everything. We do remember, I think, how it is to have 16 years old. And we told them of the remembrance, of the memory in terms of duty, of work, of lesson, of obligation. And after we are surprised that it doesn't function, why don't we not present them that memory is something that can help you, that can open your eyes, that can make you more heavy, more wise, more prepared to many dangers that you will have to avoid. We cannot, I don't know why, but in every language that I know, in every meeting that I was present, we every time speak about the memory as a very heavy duty and obligation, and not as a chance, as a help, something that can really make you more strong in your life, and certainly more intelligent. I think we have all to change our way to speaking about the memory.
This is very interesting. You just mentioned in your talk that you spent about 3 years like brainstorming on how to modernize or adapt the exhibitions, and finally you came up to the conclusion that you had to keep like the essence of what you can find in Auschwitz. When there are no survivors left, what will be essential to preserve? The sites, the narratives, or the moral questions? And who should bear this responsibility?
For me, there are two authenticities that will remain in the future. It's nearly now, even the oldest survivors now are not really physically able to accompany a visit or something like this. So we are nearly in this situation. There are two authenticities, I think. There is the authenticity of their testimonies, extremely important. There are thousands and thousands of testimonies, published or not published, in the world, in 18 or 20 languages. No one historians know 18 or 20 languages. If you have a historian that pretend to publish something because he saw all the sources, it's not true. But we are working now with Google in order to prepare a special tool for a translation to all those testimonies into the English. First of all in Auschwitz, but after we will propose that to some others memorials. And I hope that in 10 years, perhaps we will have all the testimonies. It means hundreds of thousands of pages translated into English at first, but after it will be easier to translate it in other languages. This is the first, very important, with all the objections that I expressed to the oral history. Of course, for factography, sometimes it can be some errors. If you have to tell something that happened 60 years ago, yes, you can have some mistakes. It's normal. That's why we need many testimonies in order to check. But about some other issues, there are not errors in the testimonies. When you're speaking about human feelings, what were your emotions in the camp? What was the results of the dehumanization on yourself? What was the level of your spiritual life, for example? On those issues, it's impossible to have some factographical errors even after 60 years. So this is the first. The second authenticity is authenticity of the site, and that's why somebody who looked at a book of Primo Levi or some other before the visit, this person will see more during the visit. Or this person who visited first will read more in Primo Levi after. I think in the combination of those two authenticity is perhaps one of the goals that we can and we would like to achieve. All the rest is experience.
Thank you. Dr. Glondys, I wonder if you know a Catalan writer. Actually, she was an illustrious student of this university, Montserrat Roig. Actually, she wrote a book about the Catalan deported to the Nazi camps, about 1,000. She used to say that culture is the most revolutionary political action in the long term. I wonder if you agree, and if you can develop on how through culture, through the arts, through different languages, you can reach these different audiences, special young audiences, to transmit memory.
Yes, culture has to be transmitted and is transmitted by artists. And you speak universal languages of ideas, of values. Artists do it. And it doesn't matter the medium. It may be music, it may be visual arts. They do it. They can embrace the essence of the art. Yeah, I cannot do it. I'm not an artist. Whether it is memory, understood very traditional way, like the memory of something which happened and you have to behave well, or whether it is escaping these memories and creating the better world in future. This is up to the artists. For me, almost all my activities were like escaping. I was running to the future. I was afraid of the revenge of memory, which makes me paralyzed. Thinking about the victims and remembering everything very well from the Auschwitz camp. I probably couldn't live. I had to escape this, but carrying the message of respect to life, to human life. So this is what the art is about. And I know many artists who are referring in their works to the history of Second World War or to the history of the camp, like my very good friend Laszlo Reich from Hungary, who has done so many things referring to the past and to the lack of a memory which Hungarian people presented. Because in Hungary, if you ask them who sent these Jews to Auschwitz camp, none of them would tell you that it was them, the Hungarian non-Jews. So this is like this is individual always, and the methods of presentation, the methods of reacting to to these tragedies, and the ways of reactions are very different depending on the individual person.
Thank you. No sé si tenim alguna pregunta, algun comentari. Hi ha un micròfon, si podeu parlar
Do we
al
have any
micròfon.
questions or any comments? If you can please use the mic for this. And I must say, the whole session will be recorded. Also, your comments, you will be able to access the session through YouTube. Please go.
Thank you very much for your insights are all the information. I'm actually a writer. I focus on genocide and both cultural and kind of physical genocide, especially on linguistic genocide. In fact, I'm attending Villa Decius next month. And I have 3 questions, but so it's up to you to answer the one that you find most interesting. So the first question I have is regarding working. Yes, okay. Regarding China, because in my work, I've been in Ukraine and I've also worked with Uyghur people. In fact, one of my best friends is one survivor from one of the Uyghur concentration camps in China, who's now working in linguistic rights. And you mentioned that you were trying to work with big companies that have some issues with human rights, blah, blah. And given that China is the most important producer of big myriad of products right now, how is the relation of Chinese government or Chinese universities to this memorial of Auschwitz? That was the first question. Then the second one is that for me, I've been reading a lot about different genocides and different concentration camps and also extermination camps. And for me, the most important lesson or the most important thing that I've learned is that evil takes very little to be done, and that such crimes wouldn't have been possible if it weren't for very normal people that said nothing. And it was something that flabbergasted me, because it was kind of, I learned that most probably I would have participated in that. I would have just kept silent. So how do you think that this can be taught nowadays to people? Because it is a very heavy thing to learn. And the third one is about anti-Semitism in Europe today. So my question is, what do you think is the main source of anti-Semitism nowadays in Europe? Thank you.
Gracias.
I was saying that questions are more heavy than answers, but yeah, I will just give some elements of answers to those questions because they are enormous. We could stay here until the morning probably, and we will not arrive to the conclusion. With China, I've got a few experiences, really few. They invited me one time to Nanjing to a ceremony. They asked me to take the floor. They sent me 10 or 20 times some journalists from China asking for some interviews. It's incredible, you know, how the journalists who arrive and he said that it will be published in 15 millions of exemplars. Oh, okay. You know, when I was speaking with those journalists from China, I was trying in every sentence to put the notions of the human rights in order that it would be impossible to take it without that. I think that I underestimate the role of Confucius who learned to China that the human rights are completely non-important. It's a strange imagination or a strange idea from the Western world, but what that means really. But however, I tried. China is there's no one China, there's different China. This is something that I understood already now. And seeing the ghetto, the Museum of the Ghetto of Shanghai is something else than to see some other part of this history. But I still do not have any way how to deal with. When the problem of the Uyghurs started, you know, we are in very strong contact since many years with some companies who are implanted in China, for example, Volkswagen, who created a big factory in the northern western China. And it was my first question to ask them if they analyze the situation from that point of view. They said yes, they sent a team to analyze it. They do not use any prisoners from those concentration camps created for Uyghurs. But it is a problem not only because of China. Many European companies are using, for example, kids to do our all what we use. So it is a very really concrete problem. It is very hard to be analyzed from the position of one museum. You know, I am not an analyst. You know, in a enormous center of analysis. I am director of a museum. But yes, we have to be very very careful in many directions. Unfortunately. About the evil, this will be a second day of discussion. You know what? We have a very few elements to understand why somebody was becoming a SS. Because they didn't wrote their memoirs after the war. They didn't publish books. They didn't deliver testimonies. They were some 70,000 SS used in the entire system of the camps. In Auschwitz, it was something like 9,500 in different periods, of course. But we have some information that some of them delivered on court when they were judged after the war, and some reported by prisoners that were in some stronger relation. When you are working in an office, for example, as prisoner, you met every day an SS, yes, you started to discuss with him. Yeah. The majority of them was not persuaded by the words of Adolf Hitler or Goebbels. The majority of them. Those who become SS very early, yes. You know, before in the late 20s, early 30s, perhaps, yes, but it was not the majority in Auschwitz. The majority of them becomes SS in order to not be sent to the front. This was their motivation. That's why the biggest price that they could pay for any attempt to I don't know, do something illegally in Auschwitz was to be sent to the front. So they were a sort of small people who just don't wanted to be soldiers, in fact. That's why those wonderful, you know, uniform created by Hugo Boss. That's why all those titles, exactly like the titles in the army, you know, but they were not military forces. Anti-Semitism today, this is an enormous question. I have the impression that it is in a very strong and very quick changes now. In general, in the past, we were speaking about the regular religious anti-Semitism from the 10th, 12th, 14th, 16th centuries. After the economical anti-Semitism from the late 19th century and the beginning 20th century. Now with some after this anti-Semitism Nazi, let's say genetical anti-Semitism, really a fear of racial anti-Semitism, and after perhaps some other. But I have the impression that now we are living an enormous evolution and some new forms of this old anti-Semitism appears in the discussion when I see there's some new polarizations that I still do not understand to the full. And the explanations on Netanyahu in Gaza and Hamas, it's certainly too small. I was speaking to some universities in the United States in the last 1 or 2 years. You know, I saw some emotion. I think that if Putin would take Alaska, there will be not so strong emotions that now. It's incredible. You know, they were repeating, yes, from the river to the sea. I promise you that 95% didn't know what river and which sea they are talking about. But it was something absolutely incredible. There is some new thing that appears that I'm still too teeny to analyze to the full. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi havia alguna altra mà aixecada aquí?
Any other question?
Hi, Alida Samis, PhD. Regarding educational experiences and work with associations, Mauthausen's, for instance, Mauthausen's Memory Service sends volunteers as mediators to all the world through an association that organizes this service of memory. So do you collaborate with associations? How? And which is the collaboration you are most proud of?
All my background was in the non-governmental, let's say, work before I was starting to work with Auschwitz. And I think that one very important thing that in the genetical code of the memorials, perhaps all the memorials, there is some beginnings that start with some non-governmental actions. It can be some, I don't know, some association, local association, some group of survivors, some foundation, some activists. Many times after are coming some local authorities or regional authorities or national authorities. The Ministry of Education arrive at the end in general. But the beginning is every time non-governmental. I don't know any one single memorial built in a former Nazi camp, co-organized with in cooperation with a Ministry of Education. No one single. So it really starts from the civil society. So it will be absolutely an enormous error for any memorial to not working with associations or some other aspects of the civil society, because the civil society, the associations, those kind of energy can adapt and evolve more quickly than a Minister of Education or something like this. In general, Minister of Education are every time 20 or 30 years before the today's times. If you look what was going on schools, we learned like we learned 20 years ago. We have, without seeing that the world is changing completely. But with the non-governmental different entities, it's more easy to react and to adapt at the very valuable time when this reaction is needed, before all the programs will change and all the books and all the way to teach the future teachers even.
And I was the director of an association for 15 years. It was Villa Decius Association, my last job. And almost all projects which I mentioned today were created by me and my association. When working for the association, you are free. There's nobody who can frighten you. You can do what you want as long as it makes sense, as long as you find sponsors for what you want to do. But it is beautiful because there are no restrictions, and you can enter all rooms, all cabinets of ministers or diplomats or whoever you want. So it is something which should be cherished in case of association. Lack of formal restrictions, lack of this hierarchy, which is sometimes paralyzing, and the freedom of your thought and the freedom of your actions. Beautiful.
Crec que tenim temps per una última
We have
intervenció.
time for a final question or comment.
In your speech, you have defended the work of, from the journalists and the media. What is your opinion about social media?
Thank you very much. No, of course, I was speaking about journalists. It is a job that we have to take care about because the tendency is that it disappears more and more. Control-C, Control-V do not make a journalist now, and it's a real problem. The social media, for me, it's one of the most direct problem of many of our troubles now. It do not connect people. If somebody tell you that it connect people, that means it's just an ad and not a true. It put people in some ghettos. We put ourselves in some ghettos. If you think that the earth is flat, in 5 years, I promise you will have on your Facebook or nearly only people that think that, yes, the earth is flat. You will enter in those kind of room, you will enter in those kind of groups, you will cherish yourself by some new arguments. I think that with the social media, in fact, we were thinking maybe 20 years ago or 15 years ago that we will find some new, I don't know, or refine some people that we knew in the school. It's fantastic because I was in the school in Switzerland and in France, so I even don't know where to look for those kids that were with me in schools. No. At the end, you are small by small by yourself, creating a ghetto around you, waiting to find people that are thinking in a similar way to you. And if you're not able to create a perfect ghetto, the algorithms will help you.
Crec que ho hauríem de deixar aquí, són ja les
We
8.
shall call it a day. It's
Thank you very much
8:05.
for your words and for approaching us to the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial experience. Gràcies a l'EUROM per organitzar aquest acte.
Thank you, EUROM, for organizing this conference, and thank you all the attendees. Thank you. Good afternoon.